Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we'll be making this summer themed illustration and I really hope you will enjoy this one, and if you do, please leave a like. But first, let's talk about some hardware. A lot of times in the comments you ask for advice on what laptop to get for Blender, and as it happens, I'm currently in the market for one as I plan to take my work on the road over the course of this summer. So I'm all the more excited that this tutorial is sponsored by ASUS and Intel, and they sent over their ProArt Studiobook 16 OLED laptop to test out. And I want to mention three important things that in the end make this laptop my pick for the summer. First of all, performance. This particular piece is the ASUS ProArt Studiobook 16 OLED, powered by the Intel Core i9-13980HX CPU and NVIDIA RTX 4060. That's quite handful to say, but the key takeaway is that it's ProArt series laptop focused on creators. It has a 16-inch 3.2K OLED display, and the whole thing is powered by the 13th generation i9 CPU by Intel and powerful GPU capable of real-time render previews. So basically I don't even notice a difference when I need to leave my desktop workstation behind. Additionally, it includes the ASUS dial control, which allows you to customize what features you adjust with the wheel. Just to mention one example, I use it in combination with a pen stylus when the dial becomes a surrogate for my mouse wheel. Also, the ProArt Creator Hub application makes it easy to set it up and have all your preferences and settings in one place across your ASUS devices. And finally, the display. The ASUS Lumina OLED features a stunning 16-inch 3.2K OLED 16:10 ratio touch display with 4K pen pressure sensitivity, so it's effectively a pen display as well. It's vibrant, crisp and color accurate, so again, no compromises on the road. So if you're a creator like me, looking for a laptop that can keep up with your creative needs, this one can definitely fill those shoes. Check out the link in the description to check out details on this laptop and Intel processor, and let me know in the comments how you like it. And make sure you stay until the end because I will plug the external camera and show you how the laptop renders this scene in real time. Now let's jump right into empty Blender file, and first thing, let's just select the cube and the light, press X and delete. And the first object we'll create are the glasses. We'll have three objects in the scene: glasses, the coconut and the popsicle. So let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. Now tap into the edit mode, press S to scale it down. Let's make it really small like this. And now let's press R, then X and 90 to rotate this 90 degrees and confirm with enter. And now look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, and let's zoom in. And now I'll press G and move it aside like this, and now we can add mirror modifier. So go to the modifiers panel and let's add the mirror modifier, and be sure to check clipping as well. And now if you press G, it will merge in the middle like this, and we can make this even smaller, just like that. And now let's select these two verts and let's just hold Ctrl and right click here. This is a perfect way how you can easily extrude objects. And now let's select the bottom verts and let's hold Ctrl and click right here. And now we'll extrude to this side and connect to the bottom side right here. So let's hold Ctrl and right click like this until you have a shape of the glasses you're satisfied with. And now let's make a shorter one like this, and one more. And now let's select these two and hold Ctrl, and again we'll right click all the way here until we have a shape of the glasses complete like this. And now just select these final verts and press F to fill. Now of course we'll need to readjust a little bit and move some verts around, so just select them and press G and move them around until you are satisfied with the shape. And I think we could have something like this here. Okay, and I think this works just fine. And maybe we can bring this closer like this and move this vert. And now let's select these two verts on the side, and let's make sure they're aligned on the x-axis. So press S, then X and 0 on a numpad and confirm. And now we can separate them from the geometry. So let's press Shift D to duplicate, right click to release in place, and we'll press P and separate the selection. Now we can tab out and select the new object, tap into the edit mode, look from the side, press A to select all and just extrude them. So press E then Y and extrude them on the Y axis. and now hold Control and right click towards the bottom, and you should have something like this. Of course, you can select them, press G then Y and move them to readjust this. And now let's make sure the origin point is right here. So select these two verts, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now we can tab out, right click and set origin to 3D cursor. So this way we can press R then Z and rotate this. But you can see the mirror stopped working because we moved the origin point. So we can select mirror object right here and it will work as planned. Now let's select the main glasses object and we can add solidify modifier right here and increase the size. That will give it some volume like this. And now we can add the bevel modifier with 2 segments and reduce the amount. And finally we can press Ctrl 1 to add subdivision surface, or Ctrl 2 if you want it more detailed. You will see the levels right here. And if you want to take care of parts like this, that's the bevel modifier, so just increase the angle until it disappears. Just like this, and now just right click and shade smooth. Now we'll transfer these modifiers to the side, but first let's select this object, press G then Y and move it like this so it doesn't interfere with the main object. And right now hold Shift, select the glasses, and we'll click the solidify and choose copy to select it. Now the bevel as well. And finally the subdivision. We don't want to transfer mirror modifier because there is a change there. So now we can just select this, right click and shade smooth. And finally we'll make a glass in front. So let's select the glasses, tab into the edit mode, alt click this loop right here, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now let's tab out and let's press Shift A and we'll add a new plane. Tab into the edit mode, press S and scale it down like this and press R, then X and 90 to rotate 90 degrees. And we can tab out for a second, press G then Y and move it inside. Just like that, and now we'll work with the shape. So let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, tab into the edit mode and let's press S then Z and scale it down. And now we'll subdivide this. So let's make sure we have the X-ray active. Let's press Ctrl R and increase the cuts with the mouse wheel to like 3, right click to release, and let's do the same on the vertical axis, something like this here. And now we can select the top row of the vertices, move it down and adjust this shape right here, bring this closer, here as well, and finally move these around. Okay, just like this, and now select these two verts in the front. Let's enable proportional editing, press G then Y and move it towards the front, but we can reduce the fall off with the mouse wheel or with the dial and do a little bump like this. Now we can tab out, press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision, right click and shade smooth and turn off the X-ray view. Now we can press G then Y and readjust this a little bit like this. And now let's add that mirror modifier and use the glasses as the mirroring object. Now we can select everything and parent it to the main glasses object. So press Ctrl P and parent to object. Now let's move this aside. So let's select them, press G then X and move it here. Let's hold Shift S, snap cursor to world origin to reset it. And now let's press Shift A and we'll add mesh and UV sphere. They'll serve as a base for the coconut. And now let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, tab into the edit mode and press G then Z and 1 to move this 1 meter up. And I can see I forgot to turn off my proportional editing, so let's do that right now. And now let's enable X-ray view, select all of these vertices on top and press X and delete them. And now we'll modify the shape a little bit. So alt click this loop right here. We can enable proportional editing again, press G then Z and start moving it up. And we can again increase the fall off either with the mouse wheel or dial if you have that option, and create something like this, and we can make it smaller here and reduce the fall off a little bit. Okay, I think this will work just fine. And now let's turn off the X-ray view. Let's press A to select all and Alt E and extrude faces along normals, and let's extrude this inside like this. And additionally we can bring this loop up, so alt click disable proportional by pressing O, press G then Z and move this up just like that. And now I want to create these like little ridges around. I was looking at the coconut references, and they have like a different structure and texture. They can even have hair and stuff like that, but this is a very stylized version of the coconut. So I think like these small ridges here and there will give a hint that this is a coconut shell, and I think this will be enough for this kind of stylized illustration. So let's press 2 for edge select, and we'll just go ahead and click, hold Control and click down here to select this loop. And now let's hold Shift, select some other one, and hold Control, and we can go lower. And now we can, for example, hold Shift, select this one and make this one shorter, this one further away. And basically just like this, we'll select multiple types of these ridges that we want to work with. And now that they are selected, let's press Ctrl B to bevel. Let's create the bevel like this and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel, just like that. But we'll need to take care of these vertices on top. So let's press 1 for vertex select. Let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, and we can enable X-ray view. And we can use this view to just select them like this. And since we used different heights of these edge loops, we'll need to make multiple selections, but so far up here it will be enough. So press G twice and just slide them up like this. And now down here we can see this row has 3 of them, so press G twice and slide them down like that. And here we have another set, so let's press G twice and slide them down like this. And I think we have some here as well, so let's slide those 2, and I can see one here. Okay, now we can disable X-ray view and go back to the edge select by pressing 2. And again, we'll need to manually select these inside edge loops. So same as before, we just go around, hold Shift and select the new edge, and then Control to select the loop or the endpoint of the loop. And now that they are selected, we can press S, then Shift Z, and just scale them out on the X and Y axis like this. And now we can tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision surface modifier, and this is what we have here. So right click, shade smooth, and basically that's the shell. Now to make it look nicer up top, we can add some supporting loops. So let's tab back into the edit mode, and since we created some n-gons here, we'll need to use the knife tool. So let's press 1 for the front view, press K, and just here near the top, click with the left mouse button, press C to enable cut through, and then A to lock the angle, and just go to the other side like this. Confirm with the left click and confirm the cut with enter. And now you have supporting loop and nice sharp edge right there. And now let's finish with the inside. There should be like that white coconut part. So let's tab back into the edit mode. Let's look from the top, and we can just select this vertex right here. Make sure the bottom one is not selected. So if you have the X-ray on, make sure it's off. And now we'll press Ctrl and plus on the numpad to expand that selection until we reach the top like this. And now we can press Shift D to duplicate this, right click to release, and again we'll press P and separate that selection to another object. And now we can tab out, select the new object, and here we can afford to use the solidify modifier and just increase the thickness like this. Add some bevel modifier, increase the number of segments, and press Ctrl 1 for the subdivision surface, or Ctrl 2 if you want it more detailed. And now if you turn on the X-ray, we actually don't really need this loop right here. So let's select it by holding Alt and left click and press Ctrl X to dissolve. And now if you tab back, you can have a more space for that bevel modifier. And let's actually reduce the amount a little bit like this. And optionally, we can just select this and move it down a tiny bit. Okay, so that's the coconut. And of course, it's very easy to control the thickness with solidify modifier here. And finally, let's make sure the stack is correct. So let's move the subdivision all the way below the bevel. So now that the coconut is ready, let's create a straw. And for that, I will use the extra objects add-on. So let's press edit, preferences, and in the add-ons, let's search for extra. and locate extra objects. Check the box, close the preferences, and now if you press Shift A, you should see all of these options here, including the single vert. So let's add it. Let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad. And now let's press 1 for vertex select, that's really important here. And just press E to extrude and Z to lock it on Z axis, like this. And now E, then X to extrude on the X. Select this vertex, press Ctrl B, then V to enable vertex bevel, and create the bevel like this and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel. And I want this to be really dense, and you will see why just in a second. So let's make sure it's really dense like this. And now we can tab out, right click and convert to curve. And now in the curve settings, geometry section, let's increase the depth. So this will give it actual shape. And now we can tab in and let's just select every other control point here. Let's start with the second one and then every other here by holding Shift. And now let's press Alt S to modify the radius, just like this. Now we can tab out and let's go to the modifier stack. And before we add any modifier, we can right click and convert this to mesh, because now we're able to right click and shade auto smooth and increase the angle of the auto smooth to something like 50. So that will make sure all of the angles, maybe not so much, maybe something like 40, we'll see. But here we want this to be sharp, so we can just select this manually and push it up until it becomes sharp, and same here. Okay, like this. And now we are free to add that solidify modifier, and we have a nice straw, really easy and quick like this. And now we can press R and just rotate it. Make sure you enable X-ray view so you can see the edge there, and just leave it like this. Let's turn off the X-ray and let's check it out. And I think this looks quite okay. So now we can add like a little umbrella. So let's press Shift A and again we'll add single vert. And with the vertex select active, we'll just press E then Z and move it up like this. Let's tab out, right click and convert to curve. Now in the curve settings, again, we'll increase the bevel geometry just like that. And let's tab into the edit mode, select the top control point. Let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now tab out and let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle. And let's tab into the edit mode, press F to fill. And now press Ctrl F for a face menu and we'll poke faces like here. So they'll create vertex in the middle. So we can now alt click the outer loop and press G then Z and move it down just like this and make it smaller if you want. Just like that. And now we'll play with the shape, but we are not able to cut through like this because there's a single vert here. So let's make sure we can bevel it. So press Ctrl B then V and create the bevel. Let's reduce to just one segment and let's create the bevel like this. And now we can press X and delete faces. And now we are able to press Ctrl R and create two cuts right here. Right click to release and we can press G then Z and move them down. So we have a little curvature happening there. And if you want this to be a little bit more smooth, you can press 2 for edge select, alt click and hold Shift and click here and press Ctrl B to bevel. And that will make this transition much smoother. So now let's create like a supporting structure for this top of the umbrella. So alt click and select this loop right here. If you look from the top by pressing 7 on numpad, it's the one that's aligned with the y-axis. And now we'll just press Shift D to duplicate it, right click to release, press P and separate the selection. That will create a new object here. So tab out, select that new object. And as you might have guessed, we'll right click and convert to curve and increase the bevel geometry just like this. And now we'll modify the endpoint. So tab into the edit mode, let's select it, press G then Y, move it on the y-axis a little bit and press Alt S and make the radius a little bit larger. Okay, like this. Now tab out, right click and convert back to mesh. Now tab into the edit mode, alt click the loop and press F to fill and we'll create one supporting loop here. So Ctrl R, click and move it towards the edge like this and confirm with the left click. So now when we tab out and press Ctrl 2, we have a nice smooth object, right click and shade smooth. Now we'll duplicate it all around. So let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad and we'll press Alt D and then R immediately. So we enable a rotation right after duplication. So now we'll just enter 3, 0 to rotate 30 degrees and confirm with enter. And since this was one operation, we can just press Shift and R to repeat it however. as many times as we like. And basically this is almost finished. Now let's select this, Ctrl 1 to add subdivision, right click, shade smooth, and we'll create one more thing on top here. So let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle. Let's modify it to something like 12. Tab into the edit mode, press S to scale it down. Now F to fill and I to inset, so we have some supporting loop there. Alt click the outer loop again, press E then Z and extrude it like this. Press F to fill, press Ctrl R to create the supporting loop down here. Tab out and Ctrl 2, right click, shade smooth, and basically that's the umbrella. Now we can maybe move it down a little bit if you want. And let's make sure this is smooth here, so right click and shade smooth. Now we can select everything and parent it to the stick, so press Ctrl P and parent to object. Now we can just press R and rotate it like this. And the final thing I want to create here is the fluid surface. So let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to world origin. Let's press Shift A and we'll add a mesh and circle. And let's modify this back to 32 vertices. And let's press G then Z and move this up like this. And we can tab into the edit mode. Let's enable X-ray view and we can make it smaller a little bit like this. And now press Ctrl F for a face menu and we'll choose grid fill. So we have some structure there. Now we can tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision surface. Now if you go to the modifiers panel and disable optimal display, now if you preview this, you will see that the mesh is quite dense. So we are able to now add displacement. So let's add new modifier and let's choose displace. And instead of normal, we'll choose Z direction. Let's reduce the strength a little bit. And we'll create a new texture for that, and let's go to the texture settings and switch it to clouds, so we have something like this here. And now just increase the size so it's, you know, something interesting. It's not just a flat surface. So now we can right click, shade smooth, and disable the X-ray view. Now I think this is too dense, so let's increase the scale a little bit like this and move it up. Okay, and now let's select the umbrella, hold Shift, select the straw, the surface inside of the coconut and the shell, and press Ctrl P and parent to object. So now we are able to scale this down because you can see it's clearly much larger than the glasses. And the final object will be the popsicle. So let's press G then X, move this to the side. And now we'll press Shift A and we'll add a plane. Tab into the edit mode, press S to scale it down like this, and then S, then Y to scale it on Y-axis as well. And now we can press E to extrude just a tiny bit, and you will see why in a second. And now we can extrude some more and press Ctrl R and create a loop cut right here, and once more, and move it towards the back. So now we prepared the structure of this object so that when we tab out and press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision modifier, we get something like this. And the reason why I extruded the bottom is that now we are able to select these faces. So let's hold Shift and select them all around. And we are basically able to press Alt E and extrude along normals. And we can create like a popsicle puddle here. Just like that. And now to make this a little bit more interesting, we can press 2 for edge select. Select just these two edges by holding Shift. Right click and subdivide. That will effectively create N-gon there, but don't worry about that right now. And just make something similar here and subdivide this as well. And now we are able to look from the top, enable vertex select, X-ray view, and move this around to create some nice puddle effect. And if you want, you can now press Ctrl R and create some more of this and make this structure look a little bit more interesting. Okay, something like that. And now let's turn off the X-ray view and let's press Ctrl R and create a cut right here, so the transition is a little bit more sharp. And now at the bottom we can press 3 for face select, select these faces, press X and delete them, so it kind of better connects with like the underlying structure or the background and when we place it on some. So let's now create a stick right here in the back. So press 2 for edge select, select this edge, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it, tab out, and let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane, tab into the edit mode and press S to scale this down. Now select this edge, press G then Y and move it outside. And now again we'll need to create some structure for this, so let's enable X-ray view. Let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad, select everything and just move it up a little bit. And now press Ctrl R to create the cut right here that's close to the popsicle, and now one more that's like here, so we can have this rounded. So now tab out and we'll add subdivision surface modifier like this with just one level of subdivision. And now we'll add solidify, make this a little bit thicker, or you can go to the other side like this. Now we'll add the bevel modifier with 2 segments, reduce the bevel amount tiny bit and make sure the angles are correct because I don't want the bevel to be happening here. So let's increase the angle to something like 50. And now one more subdivision surface modifier with one level of subdivision to make this more smooth. Right click and shade smooth. And now we can just press G then Z and move this up. And here I think we can afford to have like 3 levels of subdivision, right click and shade smooth. And let's just parent this, so press Ctrl P and parent to object. So basically that's all the object will need for the scene. So let's arrange them into a nice composition. So let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to world origin, and let's select the coconut and we can press Alt G to reset its position. Now select the popsicle, press G then Shift Z and move it to the side like this. And now the glasses, we can press G then Shift Z and move them right here, and press R then Z and rotate them a little bit. And I think they will look great if one of these handles were like, you know, rotated around. So we'll need to separate them because right now they're made using the mirror modifier. So let's just remove the mirror modifier, and we can use the new feature in the Blender 3.6, and that's the parent object coordinates. So let's go here and switch to parent. So now we can press Alt D and X to move this according to the parent position. Let's move it like here, and now we can press S then X and -1 to flip the solidify to the other side, so we are then able to rotate it around the Z-axis like this. Okay, and now select the glasses and move them up so they sit on the background, and I think this needs to be a little bit lower here like that. Okay, and let's now move them around so they better fit the scene. Let's move this away a little bit, maybe make it smaller. Okay, something like this. And now let's look from the camera by pressing 0 on a numpad, and we're far off, so we can press N for side view, and in the view options enable camera to view like here, and just use our viewport controls to position the camera the way we want here. And I think we can move this around even more. Okay, and let's position the camera a little bit like this. And now don't forget to turn this off. Let's collapse the side panel by pressing N. And now we can press Shift A and add a plane, press S and scale it up. So that's the composition, and now let's do some render preview. So let's press Ctrl B to limit the preview only to the camera bounce. And now in the render settings, I will switch to cycles, enable GPU and some denoising, and I will switch to optics denoising and reduce the samples to something like 512 for now at least. And now we can hold Z and preview the rendered. Of course, there are no lights in the scene, so let's press Shift A and we'll add a main area light, press G then Z, move it up. Let's make this larger so we have like a nice soft light coming from above, and let's increase the power to something like 250. We'll see how it works. And now we can move this on Y-axis towards the back a little bit. So that's the basic lighting for the scene, and of course we'll play a lot more with this. So now let's create some interesting materials. First, let's select the background, go to the material tab, let's create a new one, and I think something like a blue background with a little bit more roughness will be fine here. And now select the popsicle, and I'm imagining like a really cyan, strong, vibrant color like this. And let's reduce the roughness. So it's nice and glossy. And for the glasses, I think something like orange, because we have the summer theme active. So let's make this orange, and these glasses of course should be dark and glossy. So let's reduce roughness as well. Now for the coconut, let's find some nice brownish color like this. Can have little like a red tones to be more stylized and vibrant for this kind of illustration. And this will be just white but with full roughness. And this thing here might be orange. And let's reduce the roughness here as well to have some nice reflections, and we'll play a lot more with these in a second. Now select the umbrella and let's create like a reddish tone here, and we can increase the transmission tiny bit so we can have some translucency happening there. And for these, let's create like a really bright wooden color like this, a little bit more towards red probably. And let's apply the same material here, and don't forget about the stick as well. And for the straw, I think it would be great to have like a stripes there. So let's tab into the edit mode, but first let's create a new material, and let's set up the transmission here like this. And now let's increase all the way to white, and the IOR should be like 1.1, really subtle. And now let's go for face select and alt click these phase loops around. And now we can add new material slot, click assign, tab out, and we can choose the same material there as well, but now duplicate it and change the color, and it will get the same translucency. So let's look from the camera. And I think this looks quite okay, and now we'll just need to play with the lighting some more. So let's press Shift A and we'll add another area light, and let's switch this to disk, and let's press G, then Z, move it up. And let's keep it close like this, and now press G, then Shift Z and move it back until we see the reflections in the fluid like this. And you can see these kind of reflections can really make this kind of illustration pop and make it like really stylized, almost like hand drawn when you have, you know, nice reflections like that happening there. And you can move the light around to find some nice reflections. And to make it even more interesting, you can press Shift D to duplicate this, move it around to create another set of these reflections, but change the color of the light a little bit. Now you can increase the strength, and you will get this nice second set of reflections that will make this look really interesting. And also it will kind of create a nice reflection here, so we can make it even brighter, I think, and this one as well. And you can see it on the coconut how it really creates this strong gradient between the shadow and the light. So that's why I kept these lights quite close together. Let's move this to the side a little bit and back. Okay, something like this. And of course, if you don't like it, you can go back to the displacement and play with that scale. Make it, for example, larger. Okay, I think I really like this. And you can see some reflections happening here on the popsicle as well. So maybe they are not so optimal. Let's move this to the side a little bit, so it's a little bit more subtle. And we can, for example, take one of these area lights, press Shift D and move it to the side, so we have some reflection happening on the side there. And let's now modify the resolution. I don't want this angle field of view to be so wide, so let's switch this to global, press G then Z twice to bring this closer. And now let's play with the light color here as well, and you can see these nice reflections happening there. So remember, without the light there will be no glossy object, there will be no like a stylized quality to these materials. You really need to pick those lights and place them around creatively to create something a little bit more interesting. And I think here I will just fill those shadows a little bit. I don't want to overblow the lighting in the scene, but we can shift right click here and add a point light to give some more point of interest to these glasses and the coconut here. Just increase the radius to make it softer, and you will see it will not affect the whole scene so much, but it will kind of create a nice effect down here. So now let's make this a little bit darker perhaps and more saturated, and maybe the scene would benefit with a little bit stronger backlight here as well. So let's select one of these lights, for example the white one, and let's press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's make it really strong, like 500 or even more, maybe 1000. And let's press G and Z to move it lower and make it larger, and maybe a little bit further away. So we are creating this like a nice gradient on the background, and we can play with the color here as well. And you can see how nice this works with the rest of the illustration and those colors. And now to make this a little bit more vibrant, we can fill some of those shadows with world color, something violet, and we can play with the strength here, but don't go too high, like this. And now the final touch, we can go to the render settings, and in the color management we can increase the contrast to something like medium high, or you can go even more if you want and play with the exposure. So I want this to be brighter and maybe high contrast, because I want this to look really stylized, like this. And now just place the camera. And the final thing to do might be to go to the camera settings, enable depth of field, and choose some object as a focus object and play with the f-stop so you can create some blurry areas around. And now we'll go ahead and have a look how this renders on the ProArt Studiobook 16 OLED. So here's the finished scene on the display of the ProArt laptop, and let's just make sure all the settings are correct before I hit that render button. And let's just render it out. Only 13 seconds, that's all it took for this i9 CPU and RTX GPU to render out the illustration. And again, the OLED display makes it a breeze to do all the contrast and color adjustments I need to get this ready for publishing. So that's it for today's illustration. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, please leave that like, and if you're new around here, hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching. Check out that laptop in the description and have a wonderful day.